Hi, I'm Rick Keppler.
And I'm Mark Durban. This is the far east end of Big Bear Lake at the Stanfield Cutoff in April of 2011. As you can see, the lake is full. And this is the same view from 2018 when the Water District reported the lake level was down over 18 feet. The lake has not been this low since the 1960s. When the lake is full, it holds about 72,000 acre-feet of water. When the lake level drops far enough to expose the old rock dam, it is almost two-thirds empty, as it is today.
Here is another view of the lake looking south toward Stanfield Cutoff in April 2012. This is what the same scene looked like in 2018. As dramatic as some of these images might seem, it is nothing compared to what Big Bear once experienced regularly during its early years.
Check out this graph that was prepared by the Big Bear Lake Municipal Water District. It shows the lake water level for every year since January 1910 through January 2019. Look at the left side of the graph and the time period from 1910 through the 1960s. Notice how radically the lake level fluctuates during those years, and how the lake was usually half empty or lower almost 50% of the time.
Now take a look at the right side of the graph, at the time period from 1970 through 2018. It shows that the water level has been kept consistently stabilized at half full or more ever since the 1970s.
So what was going on during those early years? And what changed to finally stabilize the lake at a higher level? This is what we want to tell you about. The fact that our lake has been kept fairly full since the 1970s is not an accident.
In 1884, Frank Brown, a Redland citrus farmer, organized a Bear Valley Land and Water Company and constructed this rock dam across the narrow gorge at the far west end of Big Bear Valley, for the sole purpose of providing a reliable supply of water for the new citrus farms in Redlands. It is important to note that the new Big Bear Reservoir was not public property. It was a privately owned reservoir and was not created to provide a place to go boating or fishing.
Except for a few local cattle ranchers and some die-hard gold miners left over from the 1860 gold rush, the new Big Bear Reservoir was about as far away from any major population centers as it could be. However, in spite of the remote location, people started showing up. Each summer would find fishermen camped out all around the new lake. As a result, a resort industry began to develop, along with the valley communities. And over the years, it slowly evolved into the premier four-season vacation playground that we have today. But how that all happened is another story for another time.
What is important to point out is that in the early 1900s, tensions between the developing Big Bear communities and the water company began almost immediately. The basic problem was that the local resorts and camps needed a lake full of water to attract tourists. At the same time, the water company needed their lake water down the hill for citrus farms and the growing Redlands community. As a result, a struggle began for control of the lake water, which continues to this day.
It is hard to imagine what it was actually like back in those early years when the lake was half empty or less, sometimes for 10 to 15 years at a time. Local marinas would have to move their docks a quarter of a mile or more towards the center of the lake to chase the receding water line. During the dry winters, the problem was even worse. Sometimes the lake would be completely empty. It was not uncommon for motorists to drive their cars across the dry lake bottom from Big Bear Village over to Fawnskin.
Here is a September 1913 newspaper article expressing the concerns of both mountain and valley residents that Big Bear Lake is almost dry. Over the years, desperate Big Bear residents looked everywhere for solutions. The headline of the San Bernardino Sun on March 25, 1931, reads that Bear Valley plans to spend $10,000 to actually employ a rainmaker to hopefully raise the lake level 10 feet within the next 7 weeks. This November 1947 issue of the Grizzly tells about a pilot who claimed responsibility for spraying clouds with dry ice, causing 2 inches of snow to fall.
These images are from the historical book Vanishing Big Bear-2. They were taken at different times in the 1950s. And they graphically illustrate the typical lake level extremes. And these dramatic aerial images provided by Cap Peckham from his book Big Bear Lake were also taken in the 1950s. And this rare view is from the east side of the rock dam. It shows a dry lake bottom when the lake was completely empty.
Over the years, the negotiations between the water company and the growing Big Bear communities did not go well. Nothing could alter the fact that the water company wanted their lake water down in Redlands, and Big Bear communities needed the water left in the lake. So in 1961, the Big Bear residents voted to create the Big Bear Municipal Water District, the MWD. This allowed the local community to raise money through property taxes to be used to finance the fight for control of the lake.
On November 3, 1965, the MWD filed an action in court against the Bear Valley Mutual Water Company in an attempt to condemn Big Bear Lake. Unfortunately, this lawsuit dragged on for over 10 years until February 1976, when the closing arguments were finally heard and a decision was handed down. The court's decision found against the Big Bear Municipal Water District.
That's right. So now what? Well, all those years of litigation had been expensive for all parties involved. Both the MWD and the water company were now anxious to resolve the situation once and for all. As a result, under the direction of the court to settle this, they got together and a deal was finally agreed to, which still stands today.
That's right. This is a complicated agreement, but the important things that came out of it were the following. 1. The Bear Valley Mutual Water Company would retain ownership of all water in the lake. However, they would turn over the control and the regulation of the recreational use of the lake to the MWD. 2, and more importantly, is that the agreement called for the creation of an in-lieu water program, which allows the MWD to purchase water from alternate sources instead of draining the lake. And it is this in-lieu water program that has stabilized the lake level for the past 40+ years.
We want to take a last look at the MWD lake level graph. Even though it shows that we are now having a record 40-year low in our lake level, we can also see that we have had 4 dry weather cycles since the 1970s, and that we are more than likely at the end of the latest dry cycle. The good news is that historically, it would take only one good winter to completely fill the lake again.
Well, I hope that's right. Follow us on Facebook and YouTube, because we are planning a future 2-part video to continue the story of the struggle over water in Big Bear Lake.
Or you can pick up a copy of Vanishing Big Bear-2 if you want additional details right now on this fascinating and controversial story. And that's it for now.
Thanks for joining us. See you next time.